pregnant woman is found dead, and the investigation leads to a teenager being arrested.
Today, that 16-year-old is expected to be formally charged with murder.
The whole world is headed to hell. Save us, Jesus. The whole world is headed to hell. Save us, Jesus.
Providence police tell us 2 people were rushed to Rhode Island Hospital early Saturday morning. They say one person was shot, the other most likely stabbed. Blood stains the parking lot of this Burger King restaurant on Hartford Avenue. Police say a person was shot here around midnight Saturday.
They're all guys, probably in their 20s.
Eyewitness News spoke to these men who say they were there when the shooting happened. They didn't want us to use their names.
When we pulled into the parking lot, there was, we noticed there was like 4 or 5 people fighting over here. It looked like one kid was getting jumped. And then we came to walk around the corner to make sure he was all right, and we heard shots go off. There was probably about 4 or 5 shots. Everybody started screaming and scattering in different directions.
Police believe a second person was stabbed in the same incident. Officers found bullet casings and a knife at the scene.
He was screaming repeatedly that he was shot and he was going to die the second time it happened.
Police tell us neither of the victims' injuries were life-threatening. They say 3 people were bleeding when officers arrived at the scene, but only 2 were taken to the hospital. We spoke to a manager at the Burger King later Saturday morning. He says the restaurant had to shut down an hour early as police taped off the area and began investigating. The manager echoed eyewitnesses, saying he wasn't surprised by the crime.
I wasn't surprised for this area. It was just first time I've been around when it happened. Wrong place, wrong time.
Police tell us they saw a car speed away from the scene when they arrived. No word yet on if any suspects are in custody.
Detectives are still working to determine suspect details and to share with the public. Now they're also working to try and make sense of a motive to determine whether or not this woman was actually targeted or simply another victim of a random act of violence. Now that shooting happened on the city's west side in the Hallville neighborhood. Officers were called out to the 1100 block of Winfield Road out there around 11 o'clock last night. That's where they found the woman slouched in her vehicle with an apparent gunshot wound. Now I'm told that that woman was shot while driving in her car, and that caused her to then crash. Now what police also found as a disturbing discovery wasn't just the woman, but there was a child in the back, one just between the age of 5 and 7, a very young child. Now thankfully that child was uninjured and is currently in protective custody this morning. Meanwhile, the woman still recovering in critical condition.
Innocent driver shot at with a BB gun in Boulder County. And within the last hour, we learned that some of the men who stole a car and went on a shooting spree are under arrest.
They did find that stolen car late today after a day-long crime spree that frankly left many drivers here scared.
I just heard a really loud noise, and then the window just cracked, or whatever you want to say.
Cab driver Richard Key is now driving a loaner. His driver's side window suddenly shattered while on the job in Longmont.
The passenger goes, somebody just shot out your window, and then he goes, look, there's the hole.
Late today, this blue car was pulled out of a ditch from a park in Lafayette. Police say it was stolen from Denver. One of the 4 men inside started shooting at cars across Boulder County, likely using a BB gun. They're also accused of stealing a van. Right now, police are trying to find them.
Well, Stephen and Carolyn, it has been very difficult for this mother to have lost her daughter, but what also is agonizing is not knowing who could have done this.
This is a rural area where you would think something like this would not happen, and it's just, everyone's been violated.
There are so many questions that constantly go through Nikki Bruker's mind, and many of them begin with why.
If we could understand why would anybody want to do this anyways? I mean, even if she had, even if they've said road rage, even if it was somebody that drove by too fast, and she had maybe said slow down or something, that doesn't give that person the right to get out of their car and shoot her 4 times.
Out of nowhere, a coward shot her in the back multiple times.
Whoever did this is got to be extremely damaged to begin with, okay?
It's important to stress, despite perhaps some close calls, no one was injured, but police do want to find the other men who may be involved in these crimes. As we've seen today, they can be violent. We are live in Erie tonight. Mark Stewart.
Let's get right to the breaking news. The shooting at the mall in Washington State.
This is the man police are hunting for this morning. They say he walked into the mall and opened fire, killing 5 people in the makeup department at Macy's.
The Cascade Mall is just outside of Seattle. It's transformed into the scene of a mass shooting. Customers, many of them shell-shocked, were loaded onto buses and then taken to a safe location until their friends and their family could pick them up.
A typical night in suburbia violently interrupted, and ABC's Neil Karlinski is right there in Burlington, Washington with the very latest. Neil, good morning to you.
Dan and Paula, good morning. This is a community on lockdown right now. The man police say shot and killed 5 people inside that Macy's right there was last seen running out across this parking lot towards the highway next door, still armed with his gun.
Cascade, all Burlington units. Male ran into the women's Macy with a long rifle. We're getting multiple calls.
The first reports of shots fired started flooding in just before 7 p.m. Surveillance cameras capturing the chilling image. A suspect described by police as a Hispanic man armed with a rifle is shooting people inside the Macy's store at the Cascade Mall in Burlington, Washington, north of Seattle. Joe Zavala and his wife were inside the Macy's when the shooting started. He says he came face to face with the gunman.
What I saw was that there was a gunman holding a rifle, shooting, and he saw me and I took off running.
There are reports of women down in the makeup section.
Employee calling advising they are hiding in the break room at this time.
In all, 4 women and 1 man are shot and killed.
I found 2 ladies that were on the floor. One was face down, a lot of blood, pool of blood on the ground, and then there was another lady right next to her. I checked for her pulse. She didn't have any.
A massive search for the suspect follows reports that he ran out, headed for the nearby highway.
Again, caution people, stay indoors, stay secure. If you see something, say something.
Police saying they have no motive. The ATF and FBI joining local police at the sprawling crime scene. Hours after the shootings, terrified survivors from inside the mall were bused to a nearby church, anxious family members waiting for them. Again, the suspect is considered armed and very dangerous. People who live in the area are being urged to keep their doors locked. The manhunt continues.
Where 2 people were found dead earlier today. Zoni Christopher sits on her tailgate looking at the crime scene just a few houses away. She knows the woman who lives here, says she's not married but has 2 kids.
My granddaughter played with her daughter.
It was 4 o'clock this afternoon when Zoni heard from her neighbor down the street.
He went down to see if her son was home because he wasn't on the bus after school. He came down here, he was just in shock and said he thought somebody was dead laying in the floor.
Zoni called 911 and minutes later, the crime tape went up. Police say they peered through a window and saw 2 people dead, a man and a woman. Before going into the house, they also noticed the door already cracked open. They say at least 1 victim was shot, and they don't think this was a murder-suicide.
It is looking closer to that double homicide.
So I was glad I was not working in my yard today because I thought maybe if I had seen something and they saw me see something, it might be kind of not a good thing.
During the evening hours, police looked for witnesses and clues that might lead them to whoever pulled the trigger, and loved ones gathered, crying together, leaning on each other, all of them looking for one answer to the same question. Why?
Clown sightings are happening across the country, and it's no laughing matter. There are concerns that the trend will grow as Halloween approaches. Here's Jamie Yukas.
It's a trend spooking the nation, creepy clown sightings. Now they're threatening school districts. Police and Homeland Security are investigating scary Instagram posts in Philadelphia. The posts from over the weekend all use the word clown. Some even talk about blowing up schools. The unusual reports started surfacing back in August in Greenville, South Carolina.
Right there at that tree back there.
Children told police that clowns tried luring them into woods by offering money. Since then, sightings keep increasing. On New York's Long Island, social media threads from anonymous clown accounts kept elementary children inside during recess.
Second clown, I guess he was kneeling.
Parent Khalik Owens.
Nobody knows how to defend against it because we don't know if it's a prank or if they're really trying to harm people.
Now police are using social media to track down the costumed offenders. In LaGrange, Georgia, police posted about issuing warrants for 4 people on charges of making terroristic threats and disrupting public schools. In Kentucky, this young man was arrested for trying to scare people in a ditch. Police have arrested at least 12 people across the United States for participating in menacing stunts or making false reports. In Houston, Texas, this Instagram post shows clowns threatening to kidnap students or kill teachers. Parent Rochelle Hudson.
This would make me drive my daughter to and from school.
For anyone who thinks this is funny, police say there is at least one deadly incident linked to a clown hoax. In Reading, Pennsylvania, a 16-year-old was stabbed to death in a dispute, and he was wearing a clown mask. Rena, a 29-year-old now faces first-degree murder charges in that case. I can see why parents are concerned.
Now at 10, a double shooting and a stabbing leaves 1 man dead and 2 others hurt on Milwaukee's South Side. Good evening, I'm Katie Crowther. Police say it was a fight that turned deadly. Ben Jordan is live at 25th and Beecher where it happened. Ben.
Katie, a heavy police presence remains here at the scene more than 5 hours after the shooting. It's been an incredibly emotional night for one family still in disbelief.
Where's my boyfriend?
Shock turning into sadness along the police line for dozens of family and friends of an 18-year-old man.
He's one of the babies of the family as far as the nephews and nieces go.
Maria Rodriguez finding out her nephew, Carmelo Silva of Milwaukee, was shot and killed.
He was a sweet boy, real smart too.
Police say the double shooting started with an argument inside a house. Friends of the victim tell me it was about marijuana. Police say one man was stabbed with a sword and 2 others were shot.
All we know is that we've heard was that some guy or a couple guys ran up on him, shot him in his back.
Witnesses say he was struck by a bullet running into this convenience store where he took his last breath.
He ran out the door and collapsed inside the store trying to probably get help.
Less than a block away from where he called home.
Lock him up and it's not going to bring my nephew back.
And police did not mention if there are any outstanding suspects at this point. We do know that 2 of the other victims were taken to the hospital. 1 remains in serious condition.
Body camera video starts in silence. It shows deputy city marshals in Marksville, Louisiana, chasing an SUV in November of last year. They claimed after the chase ended that the driver posed a threat when he backed his vehicle toward them, even though it appears the driver showed both hands to the officers. 2 marshals opened fire. They shot 18 rounds. 6-year-old Jeremy Martis, diagnosed with autism, was killed in the passenger seat, hit 5 times in the head and chest. His father was driving. Christopher Few was shot twice, but survived. Marshals Derek Stafford and Norris Greenhouse Jr. are charged with second-degree murder. Stafford is heard on tape saying he didn't know the boy was there.
I never saw a kid before, man.
Yeah, he's the kid is.
I never saw a kid, bro. I was telling him to stop.
It's unclear when officers first checked on young Jeremy. You don't see an officer go to the passenger side until about 7 minutes after shots were fired.
Hey, bud. Hey, bud. Anybody else has gloves? You want to maybe pull that juvenile out and see if he...
Well, I hate to touch him. I know till Kaden gets it, man. I hate to... The only reason I'm doing him because he's the driving suspect.
The pulse.
Still working on him? He got one?
This thing. Paramedics arrived about 9 minutes after the shooting to take Few away in an ambulance.
You advise the juvenile deceased?
Protest over the deadly police shooting of a black teen erupts in chaos in South Los Angeles. Sky 2 captured a car doing donuts right in the middle of the crowd. And our ground crews caught vandals taking advantage of the chaos, spray painting a storefront.
CBS News' Erica Nochlin is live now with more on the protest and the shooting that led up to it. Erica.
Well, Peter and Elsa, this situation has turned pretty tense as LAPD has made a strong effort to disperse protesters here. A large number of LAPD and some county deputies just worked their way down 107th Street, pushing any protesters left in the streets back and telling them they had minutes to disperse or they were subject to arrest. And we actually did see some people get arrested. I think we have video of that to show you. We saw at least 4 people getting put in handcuffs and being taken away. Some of them were still shouting, wanting a revolution and shouting different things about the protests that they've been out here doing all night long. And earlier, police were not getting involved when it turned dangerous as well. Take a look. Speeding cars came feet from our camera and dangerously close to protesters standing in the street. The crowds and spinning cars shut down the intersection of Western and 108th in South LA. Police blocked off part of the intersection while a crowd of people shouted profanities, spray painting in the street, and a few even vandalized nearby businesses. This protester watched from the sidewalk.
Everybody grieve different, so I mean, if that's how they feel and they want to do that, and you feel me, they really can't do too much because the police is out here, like, you know, so yeah, so everybody has their different ways.
They're grieving the death of 18-year-old Carnell Snell Jr., shot and killed by police Saturday.
6 Newark police officers are now on administrative duty following the deadly shootings of 2 suspects. Police Safety Director Anthony Ambrose says the officers are being reassigned while the prosecutor's office investigates the shooting. This all happened early Friday morning on North 7th Street. Few details have been released, except that officers returned fire after they were shot at. 2 people died and a 3rd person was.
A pregnant woman is found dead, and the investigation leads to a teenager being arrested.
Today, that 16-year-old is expected to be formally charged with murder.
The family members of the 29-year-old woman held a candlelight vigil last night. They tell us the young mother was suffering with addiction and was ready to turn her life around through rehab. But the day before she was expected to check into that rehab facility, she went missing. The Melvindale woman's body was found in southwest Detroit in a home on Vanderbilt Street. That's near West Jefferson. Her sister asks Michigan families now to open their eyes to the cost of addiction.
Next to a new arrest in an alleged murder-for-hire plot in Florida. A suspect in court today facing a murder charge for her role in the shooting of a Florida State professor.
Tonight, this woman behind bars charged with first-degree murder, accused in connection to the killing of a prominent law professor at Florida State University. Dan Markell was shot to death in the garage of his Tallahassee home in 2014. The murder coming after his marriage to Wendy Adelson unraveled.
Friday, authorities reported that 59-year-old Linda Patricia Thompson robbed a Wyoming bank just because she wanted to be put back in prison. Thompson had recently been released from prison and was on parole with the state of Oregon. Thompson had been denied a place in a homeless shelter and had been beaten at a Cheyenne, Wyoming park the night before she decided to rob the bank. Thompson reported that she had never wanted to leave prison and had asked not to be released. But when she was put back on the streets, she went to a Wyoming bank and held up a cardboard sign telling the bank teller to hand over all the money in the drawer.
The people that are out here protesting, they're hugging and they're like, they're being very peaceful.
We were following this crowd that was largely peaceful.
Mostly peaceful. We've also seen some sweet scenes of protesters hugging one another and praying. Mostly a group of peaceful protesters. Peaceful, 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 peaceful.
Overnight, the protesters in Charlotte clashed with police, hours after the deadly shooting of Keith Lamont Scott. Several demonstrators smashed out windows of squad cars and hurled rocks at police. Officers dressed in riot gear fired tear gas to break up the crowds of people who shut down Interstate 85. Several police officers were hurt, all with non-life-threatening injuries. 7 were taken to a local hospital.
The whole reason we had to protest was because somebody was shot, unarmed.
Physically attacking reporters is not a legitimate form of protest. Shooting each other is not a legitimate form of protest. Stealing and looting cash registers from local businesses is not a legitimate form of protest. Trying to set journalists on fire is not a legitimate form of protest. Throwing rocks off bridges at passing vehicles full of families is not a legitimate form of protest. Beating up innocent people in underground parking lots because they're white is not a legitimate form of protest. Smashing up apartment windows where black people live to protest in favor of Black Lives Matter is not a legitimate form of protest. Smashing up buses that poor black people rely on to get to their jobs is not a legitimate form of protest. Looting the Charlotte Hornets team store so you can steal basketball merchandise is not a legitimate form of protest. Stealing sneakers is not a legitimate form of protest. Attempting to hijack cars and terrify their innocent occupants is not a legitimate form of protest.
It was the second straight night that the city center of Charlotte erupted in violence. Protesters clashed with and in many cases taunted police over the death of 43-year-old Keith Lamont Scott.
Looks like you got somebody down, maybe been shot.
One person was shot during the protest, and initially city officials say that individual had died, but they backtracked and now say he's on life support. We're told Charlotte police never fired a shot. Police in riot gear declared an unlawful assembly, ordering the crowds to disperse after some protesters started vandalizing and looting businesses. Officers fired tear gas and flash grenades, but hundreds of people remained well after midnight. Police and journalists were attacked. Store and car windows smashed. A night that started as a peaceful prayer vigil descended into chaos.
Yes, we came down here to protest, but we can't tear up downtown. That's not going to solve anything.
4 police officers suffered non-life-threatening injuries and at least 3 civilians were hospitalized. At one point, protesters ran onto Interstate 277, stopping traffic and surrounding drivers.
Report the shots fired.
The call started coming in early Friday evening.
Cascade all-pros in units. Male ran into the women's Macy with a long rifle.
It was chaos at the Cascade Mall, about an hour north of Seattle. Victor Solano heard the shots.
I heard about 1, and then 2, and then that's when I turned around, and then that's when round started going 1, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I've got 2 victims down bleeding in the makeup section.
These security photos show the alleged gunman inside Macy's with what looks like a rifle. Earlier pictures show him empty-handed, according to Mount Vernon Police Lieutenant Chris Kamek. In all, 5 people were killed, and shoppers were frantic, scrambling for shelter. This woman got a call from her daughter who was inside the mall.
She just said there's people shooting. I heard a gunshot. I told her to just go to the bathroom and lock the door. Just lock the door.
Police said the gunman fled the scene shortly after the shooting and headed toward the interstate. Among the clues he left behind,
I got 1 rifle left in this area.
Police recovered a weapon, but won't go into detail.
An arrest in that deadly mall shooting in Washington State.
The arrest happened without a single shot fired.
He was right there walking. I'm detained.
Suspected Cascade Mall shooter, 20-year-old Arkan Seaton, a recent high school graduate and grocery bagger, according to his Facebook page.
I saw an individual walking northbound on the sidewalk, and I instantly recognized. I did an abrupt U-turn, hit my lights, pulled my gun, and took the individual into custody.
They found him in Oak Harbor, Washington, a small Navy community about 40 minutes away from the shooting. Officers spotted him simply walking down the street.
He said nothing. He was kind of zombie-like. He did not have a weapon with him. He had a leather satchel, appeared to be a computer inside the bag.
Police arrested Seaton almost exactly 24 hours after the shooting rampage inside this Macy's. 4 women and 1 man shot to death near the makeup department. A MySpace page apparently belonging to Seaton shows several pictures of him posing with various firearms. Hours earlier, police had released new images from inside the mall. Seaton, they say, in a t-shirt and shorts, no tactical gear, and nothing to make him stand out before allegedly opening fire.
To see it happen 20 feet away from you is just, it's insane to me. It's crazy. And I never thought that I would be in that position to be staring at somebody who is losing their life, and I can't do anything about it.